Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This is my premiere for my final preseason hurricane season forecast, of course, for the year 2023. So yeah, this is of course in mid-May, and without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to start with the Nino 3.4 index. If you guys saw my video a couple days ago, I said we were officially in an El Nino. We have briefly dropped below that, but we are still in El Nino territory, and basically we're still about at that 0.5 on the positive value, which basically does mean we are still likely around El Nino, and we are still seeing El Nino effects, though for it to be an official El Nino, we have to wait about a couple months, around 1 to 3 months. The reason for my video the other day was that me saying that we are in the temperature for El Nino, but we are not officially in an El Nino. But yeah. The sea surface temperature anomaly, we do see the very warm temperatures off the Pacific and South American, Western South American coast. And then we have above average sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf Stream, and the Gulf Loop. You can really see there, and around the Bahamas regions and parts of the MDR. But we do definitely see a lot of below average temperatures in the Caribbean. So of course that does mean that Caribbean could get less activity over the next coming weeks. If there is any low pressure systems, they likely wouldn't be in the Caribbean, though that shouldn't have too much of an effect on the how the Caribbean will play in the actual hurricane season, mainly around the peak, which we will go over later. This is mainly just current. So if we see the sea surface temperatures, we definitely do see the Gulf Loop and Gulf Stream there very clearly. And yeah, we do see they're warming up because as a hurricane season approaches, we already see we're in 30 and 31 degrees Celsius in the Eastern Pacific there. So yeah, we got to watch out for that. And 28 degrees Celsius and 29 degrees Celsius in the Caribbean. We're mainly still around 27, 28 or below Celsius in the MDR. So nothing could form there right now. Then again, it's only May, so at the moment I'm not expecting any preseason storms based on the models, but we will see how that plays out. Now time to get to the actual hurricane season. So we do see the newest ENSO probabilities issued by the Climate Prediction Center. We are currently at just over a 60% chance of a neutral and just under a 40% chance of an El Nino. But as we go into June, that El Nino chance skyrockets to over 80%, and that is expected to persist throughout the entirety of the hurricane season, which could definitely probably going to make the Eastern Pacific activity go way up, potentially up to hyperactive strengths. But the Atlantic, even with a strong El Nino, we're not really expecting a extremely below average season like you would think a strong El Nino would do, which we will get to in a bit. But here we go. For the peak of the season and the vast majority of the season, including June, July, August, all the way to November, I'm expecting a 95% chance of an El Nino taking place for most or all of the hurricane season, and a 5% chance of a neutral taking place for most of or all of the hurricane season. Of course, there's always a chance, but neutral is basically zero. And of course, La Nina is definitely zero. We are definitely not going to go into a La Nina based on current forecast, and that is not expected to change anytime soon. Now let's get into the landfall. So pink are the landfall hotspots. Red are the above average or slightly above average landfall places, and then yellow is below average landfall areas. So we definitely do see up in New England and around Newfoundland, as well as the Texas-Louisiana border area and much of the Yucatan. We're not expecting that much systems to go through there. They could get 1 or 2 systems, but definitely less than an average chance of getting there. And then we do see up towards New Jersey, Cuba, Dominican Republic, the Texas-Mexico border around Louisiana, all the way up to the Alabama coast. We definitely could see more systems in the Gulf and Caribbean. Like I said, we will get to that in a bit, and that of course could make more higher chances for a tropical cyclone or up to a hurricane hitting those areas. And of course, it's way too early to say where major hurricanes are going to hit, but of course, the main landfall tropical cyclone areas will be in those pinks: the Florida Panhandle and Big Bend area, the Florida East Coast, especially the Bahamas, and the coastal Carolinas. And here's some track potential. So we see the main above average red risk area is going to be that Louisiana area, and we definitely do see a low pressure system could come off the coast of South America, go through the Caribbean, strengthen, and definitely affect the Yucatan there, where we see a bit of red. For the tip of the Yucatan, there is an above average risk. And then, of course, that could go towards Louisiana, which is why we have an above average risk for that area. Of course, we do have an out to sea storm. We're expecting that, of course. And the other three tracks I haven't covered, which I'm about to, are the hotspot tracks. So basically what we could see is similar to a Michael type track where we have a low in the Caribbean, go into the Gulf near Cuba, affect the western tip of Cuba a bit, but then rapidly strengthen over the Gulf Loop, or not, depending on how the Gulf Loop is at the time or how fast it's moving. And of course, that will go into the Florida Panhandle or Big Bend area, like a Hurricane Michael track. The other one is kind of like a Hurricane Irma track. It comes out of the MDR, strengthens a lot. Like Irma did. Of course, these are not the full tracks, but these are just the main landfall areas of the track, where these tracks are going to start affecting land. It could be a full track, such as the Louisiana one, if it's in the Caribbean, because it doesn't have to make a long trek across the MDR. But of course, we have an Irma track, so that would be something goes towards the Bahamas. And of course, it would be a pretty strong system if we're going to go on Irma strengths. But of course, it could just be a tropical storm. It could be a major hurricane. It really could be anything. It just depends on the conditions at the time. But we do see it go through the Bahamas. Then it goes through southern Florida, the Florida East Coast, and the Florida Peninsula. And then the last one is sort of a recurvature track, which is mainly going to be a Carolina threat. It goes through the Bahamas, affects a bit of the Florida East Coast, but stays off the coast. Then it recurves and makes landfall somewhere around the South Carolina, North Carolina border, which is definitely where that is making the landfall hotspot for the South Carolina region. Now we're going to go on to the SST and shear specifications for the Atlantic. So in that very bottom region where we do have the darker purple, that is below average sea surface temperatures and above average shear. So that is very unfavorable for tropical cyclone activity, and that's mainly in the southern, south, east Caribbean and much of the southern MDR. We're not expecting that much there. Now, the orange, which takes up the most of the Atlantic, is an above-average SSTs, but average shear. So basically, above-average sea surface temperatures are going to fuel these storms, and average shear is still going to interfere with them. So that's much of the MDR into the Leeward Islands, much of the Caribbean, and the western and central Gulf. Below-average sea surface temperatures and average shear are up in the mid-Atlantic, northeast water regions, Newfoundland area. So basically, any storm that goes up there is obviously going to weaken because you're going up more north, but could weaken faster due to those below average sea surface temperatures. And the main area is where systems will be most favorable to strengthen is that large purple area where we're going to have above average sea surface temperatures, which is very favorable for storm development, and below average shear, so less shear interfering with these storms. And that engulfs the entirety of the Florida coastline, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, all the way up through the Carolinas into very southern Virginia. So that's where we're going to see the highest chance for strong storms such as major hurricanes. And of course, if we go back, that could reflect such as an Irma track, a Dorian recurvature track, or a Hurricane Michael track, or more than one. Of course, it's too early to predict that. These are just some examples for a potential major hurricane area. Of course, I'm not predicting where a major hurricane is going to hit, but based on the conditions there, if a system were to strengthen to major hurricane strengths and make landfall, it would likely be in those purple regions, mainly towards Florida and through the coastal Carolinas, and especially the Florida Panhandle and Florida East Coast, based on analogs, which I showed in the last hurricane season forecast around 2 months ago. I'm not going to show it in this, mainly because analogs are not updating as much now that we're getting closer to the hurricane season, which is around 15 days away. So finally, we're going to do the chances for season activity. So we have a 20% chance of a below average season, a 30% chance of an above average season, and a 50% chance of an average or a near average season. So obviously, my probabilities have gone up for an above average season. A couple months ago, I was mainly expecting a below average season and a very low chance of above average season. But now we see the near average chances are the highest, and the above average chance is now higher than the below average chance. So that means I'm expecting around a near average to a slightly above average hurricane season, which we will get into now. So here are my 2023 hurricane season forecast, my final preseason forecast. Preseason means my final forecast before June 1st, and of course the season highlights. So I'm predicting 13 to 16 named storms. The average is 14, 7 to 9 hurricanes. The average is 7, and 2 to 4 major hurricanes. The average is 3. So obviously that reflects near average probabilities, and especially in the named storms and hurricanes category, slightly above average. Major hurricanes could go either way. And highlights: the main development region will likely be less active, mainly due to the southern